Welcome to Policy on Demand. I'm Sindhu Blume. It is the week of November 11th, and this is your Monday briefing. It is Veterans Day today, and to all of our colleagues, clients, and anyone watching who served in the military, thank you. Congress is out, but they return tomorrow to begin a 5-week post-election lame duck session. We're watching the composition of the House, namely, whether there is a unified Republican control or divided government, which will affect both the lame duck session and the next Congress. During the lame duck session, Congress will focus on funding the government and avoiding a shutdown by December 20th. They're also going to take up disaster aid, the National Defense Reauthorization Act, and the Farm Bill. And of course, figuring out leadership. One thing is for certain, the balance of power in Washington has shifted. An election also changes the power of issues and initiatives, such as Pillars 1 and 2. I had a chance to speak with Will Morris previously about the future of Pillars 1 and 2. With the makeup of Congress changing, the path for the OECD's project also changes. Here's our conversation. Will, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be back.
I want to point out it has been quite some time since we've seen you here, and it has taken a U.S. presidential election to get you back. So thank you.
Well, I'm delighted. I've been asking myself why many times, but here we are.
So let's get into this. I want to find out from you, companies outside the U.S., as a result of this election, what are their biggest issues?
Right. Well, so I think probably in 3 big buckets, there's as there is for US corporations as well, there's TCJA reauthorization. Everybody knows that 2025, everything's going to be in the mix. So they're looking at that. The second thing is tariffs. We do have to talk a bit about tariffs. And then the third, of course, is our favorite, the OECD 2-pillar project and what happens with that.
All right, so let's get into the details. With respect to the TCJA provisions, how are companies affected outside the US?
In a sense, we don't know until we know what happens in 2025. But there are sort of some general buckets. The first is obviously the rate itself, the general corporate rate. And now with the Republicans gaining the Senate, who knows about the House? But again, it seems unlikely that the rate is going to go up dramatically, which obviously was a possibility. There are, one of the big issues is BEAT. The BEAT rate goes up at the end of 2025 from 10% to 12.5%. At the same time, credits now have to be included and thus reducing the income and thereby potentially increasing the BEAT amount. And this, particularly for non-US corporations who will be paying more to parents overseas, to overseas affiliates, this could actually dramatically increase the amount of tax they have to pay in the US. So they will be looking at that very closely. And then, a possible third bucket of things that people will be looking at is the Inflation Reduction Act has been talked about. This is not part of the reauthorization, but this could be a pay-for in the 2025 legislation that some of those IRA credits might be stripped back. And we know that a lot of overseas corporations have been attracted to make investment in the US based on those IRA credits. So again, 3 things there particularly to look out for.
Okay, and I think with TCJA, it's on this side of the pond and that side of the pond and the other pond. Yeah. So let's move on to tariffs. Hot button issue, very much in the news these days. How is that going to play out?
Well, again, we don't know because obviously, during the course of 2025, we'll find out more about that, maybe relatively early on. But I think it's fair to say that tariffs really have become a bipartisan issue. I mean, we live in a changed world in that respect. So I think a lot of people expected President Biden might reduce the tariffs when he came into office. He didn't. He actually increased them in some cases. So we know that former and now President-elect Trump has been talking about tariffs a lot during the campaign in relation to various countries, some in relation to EVs, some in relation to other types of vehicles, other products as well. There's been quite a range of numbers talked about as well. Obviously, only when he comes into office and when he considers what it is that he wants to do with that, will we actually know. But it is a huge focus of attention. And we know already that other countries have said, well, if tariffs go up, then we're going to have to respond. And we would expect to see that around the world. I was in Mexico a couple of weeks ago. Huge attention there, our largest trading partner.
Right.
And I know you've talked about it in other episodes. But a lot of attention there. But they also have their regime. The EU has talked about this as well. So I think that what we don't want really is a tit-for-tat game. But we'll have to see how things evolve.
Okay, and finally, a topic that has been on our minds for a very, very long time. The OECD's two-pillar project, very dependent, I think, on the makeup of the House and the Senate. So talk about how that's going to go, or you think it's going to go.
Right. So, I mean, Pillar 1, I think, let's be honest, amongst friends, is, I think, pretty much dead. We don't even have a text. We don't have agreement on Amount A and Amount B. The current Treasury has been very reluctant, and obviously hasn't, signed on to it. There isn't anything to sign on to, but even were it to come out, has said, we're not sure, does this match our red lines? So, obviously the fact that there is now a Republican majority in the Senate makes it even less likely that there will be ratification. I'm not sure there were 50 votes before this, far less 67. So I think Pillar 1, doesn't go on. Now, that doesn't mean that things don't happen. On Pillar 2, again, the change configuration makes it even less likely that there will be adoption of the full set of Pillar 2 rules. But again, I think that was very unlikely, right now, under the current configuration. However, with Pillar 2, we know at the end of 2025, not coincidentally, because the OECD gave effectively, or countries gave, a one-year extension on the UTPR safe harbor to allow the US to sort itself out as they saw it, during next year. But at the end of that, when that safe harbor for parent entity income essentially expires, there is a big, big problem with the UTPR. It's a political problem. It's not really a technical one. That needs to be sorted out. But again, that sort of gets connected into the politics of the rest of this. So, on both of those, we'll have to see. But it will be interesting.
In connection with the tariffs, though, what happens if Pillar 1 doesn't make it?
Well, I think we can expect, unfortunately, with some confidence, to see digital services taxes, or DSTs, springing up in a number of countries. And, again, we don't know what will happen with that. There has been a standstill on the 7 or so countries that already have them, UK, France, etc. My guess is that standby would end. Mm-hmm. Those have already had the 301 investigation done. The tariffs could be ready to go. In relation to others, however, it partly depends on how many countries do it. It also depends on, do you pick on a couple, particularly those who are talking about raising their rates to 6%, for example. Again, we don't know. Dealing with a very large number of countries through the 301 process could be quite difficult. Are there other things? Well, people have talked about, for example, changes to Code Section 891, which would allow for more automatic imposition of certain penalties. So again, I think we will see DSTs. I think there will be a US reaction because, again, this has been a very, very, very bipartisan issue for, as long as the DSTs have been around. We'll have to see. Hopefully, cool heads will prevail and we'll figure out a way around this. But, we do have to watch out for that, and businesses will have to watch out for that a lot.
Well, we'll have to end it there, but I have a feeling we're going to be coming back to this.
I would be delighted.
More than once. Thank you, Will.
You're very welcome.
In addition to this conversation, we're also looking into other issues affected by this year's election, such as healthcare, sustainability, and more. Those episodes will come out in the coming weeks. Thank you for taking the time to join us, and have a great week. Take care.